Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Amp Up Solar Talk. Today we're diving into one big beautiful bill and what it means for the future of solar. Joining us today is someone who really doesn't need that much of an introduction, but we've got James Showalter here, founder and CEO of EG4 and Signature Solar. He's been with us before, sharing insights on products such as the Grid Boss and Flex Boss, and today he's here to help us understand some major policy shifts and what they mean for homeowners, installers, and the solar industry at large. Hey, if you're watching live, be sure and drop your questions in the chat. We'd love to include your voice in the conversation. James, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Kelly.
Absolutely. So you spent some time on Capitol Hill lobbying for residential solar while this bill was being discussed, and now we're here actually discussing what's been passed. So for our audience, help us understand what this big, beautiful bill means. I know it's over about 900 pages is what I understand. We're actually just discussing the solar part, but what does this mean for solar?
Well, starting with your target, Signature Solar do-it-yourself customer, right? I think, unfortunately, the way that things ended up going was very much against system ownership or subsidy supporting system ownership. So that was, I think, corrective pressure, although we've always wanted to see the industry get to a point where people were very excited about the value prop of solar without any subsidies. It's just a temporary imbalance that has been created where lease companies and companies that install, own the system, and just rent it to you, they will continue to get subsidies, frankly, into the 2032 period of time, which we running market data is still in that $100 billion range of government involvement in the market. But do-it-yourselfers starting January 1st of next year will be excluded from that. So it was a huge handout to some public solar lease companies that really lobbied, frankly, longer and better than some of us in the industry.
So to simplify this a little bit, talk to me a little bit more about the actual timeframes for residential and then the leases, and then are commercial and then utility scale solar involved in this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was really how we got the outcome that we got, because of most of the money in the industry is tied to the utility scale, which uses the same subsidy and footprint as the lease company. So we think that on the residential side, starting next year, if you want to own your system on day one, you can do so, and we're here to help you do so. There's going to be some great projects that you can do with cost-effective equipment, but there's not going to be any kind of tax credit after January 1st. And I think, honestly, that's a really narrow context for Signature Solar, because Signature Solar is focused on people that want to build and own their systems. You will see, I think, in the alternative to doing your own work, which a lot of our DIY customers were inspired by, because of, they may not have had, really competitive install options where they are at. You're going to see installers go from trying to sell you a system on a loan, Kelly, and they're going to try to sell you a monthly payment. So it'll be, because they're not actually allowed to let you own that system in order to get the subsidy. They need to hold your system in a holding company. I think there may be a way to do this in a beneficial way for the homeowner, where, like, after 6 years they can take over the system, which is the recapture of the subsidy. Some technical tax law that came into play there, but it'll be a thing where a lot of times people come to us and they've been financed a system, or they've been quoted a finance system, and the gross total price of the system is just so much different than getting the work done themselves, and that's why do-it-yourself was the right thing for them. People have to kind of step back and do the math and convert out the total cost of all those payments they're signing up for with the leases. So it's going to be a different environment for sure. It'll also be, and I think when we did some internal testing, I think maybe 54% of our customers said that they weren't even using the tax credit, a little over 50%. And so, for us, it's the same challenge we've always had, which is, we want to keep providing additional value over at EG4 to where this is just a no-brainer overriding question to solve without asking tax questions. So we do prefer a market without government involvement, frankly.
Sure.
But it's something that happened, very, very fast and rough on the do-it-yourself and the ownership market, and the rest of the industry got this really soft landing. Yes.
Right. So the tax credit ends at the end of this year.
At the end of this year, yes.
For residential solar.
Residential, that's correct. So that was the Section 25D, which you as a homeowner can take on your own personal taxes, right? But the tax credits for businesses, utilities, and then a business that leases to homeowners, a lease company, lease installation, those tax credits are good. I think on solar, it's for the next 3 years, but then the battery credit goes for the next 8 years. And there's a lot of ways to fudge the solar cost into the battery cost, so it'll effectively get those credits into the 2032 and beyond range.
So do you think this is going to help battery storage?
As an industry, it really probably will. There were some restrictions that were actually, if you're talking about just narrowly commercial customers, there were some restrictions on Chinese participation in IP, and that poses some specific problems for the industry, because there's very little battery capacity that's not Chinese, which is something we've been working on for over a year at EG4, actually, getting a non-Chinese battery solution to be prepared to comply for this. Again, if you're a homeowner next year, I doubt you're going to try to get a non-Chinese battery cell in your battery, because there really is no incentive to get to be domestic content. But in the commercial space, it's going to be harder and harder to do it with the Chinese cells. And there's also, like, even on a deeper level, right, the real IP that's specifically tied to that market is the anode material for the batteries. And that is one thing where how in the United States we prohibited a lot of chips from being sold into China. China retaliated by prohibiting IP from being exported. Some of the IP included was lithium battery cell anode material. So it's a tricky game of really who are the players that can put anode in the U.S. and grow, and then hopefully we get to a point where the American industry gets strong enough. And of course, there still is the tariff protection, which has really changed a lot this year. Hopefully we get to a point where not only can we be an overwhelming value prop compared to buying power from the grid, but we can also do it with American lithium manufacturing.
Right. So that's kind of where we're moving, is American manufacturing.
Yeah, I think the business and the commercial and lease finance case will go American several years ahead of the rest of people. But if the current tariff regimen of 60% stays or is enhanced on China for cells, and I think that we're starting to get some signals that people are starting to look at batteries as national security. If those are if those stay, they're enforced and enhanced, potentially it will make more sense to source it in the United States. But there's a lot of moving pieces there, Kelly. So we don't really know if all that'll come together that way, or if what we'll end up doing is actually buying from a third-party country in the Asian Pacific region that might have some Chinese participation and some third-party ownership. So it's way too early, right? Industry tends to take a year or two. But I do know for sure next year, if you don't have American cells and you're in the commercial business or the lease business, you might have some serious problems, even though the products are going to cost significantly more next year in this quick of a turnaround for American cells.
Well, one thing that I know that I've seen with EG4 so far is you've always been, seems like, one step ahead. You've always been strategizing. You've always been innovative. And so it seems like there's opportunity here. And that's what's exciting for me to kind of watch what's happening right now. So we have a lot of audience questions coming in, but I did, before we get to those, want to take one step back. And you said something about, we did a breakdown of only about 54% were even utilizing the tax credit. Let's talk a little bit more about what that tax credit has even been in the past. What does that mean?
Mhm.
What has been the reality of that tax credit?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a good point to kind of pivot back to. The subsidy that's going away for homeowners was actually the weakest subsidy, right? Whenever green technology would get subsidized, the farms and the utilities would get a chunk of money that just worked well for them, and homeowners, would get a lot of restrictions. So the 25D credit was not really an unlimited subsidy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could get it if you had taxes that you had paid that year,
Mm-hmm.
and it was up to the amount of taxes you had paid that year. And so 30% on a $10,000 system, $3,000 as an example, for instance. And then, if you got a $3,000 tax credit, as long as you had paid in $3,000 in taxes, you could get that $3,000 refunded. But if you hadn't, then you could only utilize what you paid in, and the rest would roll over. So you had a lot of people that had tax planned their lives, or maybe they were doing DIY solar as a hobby and retirement, and so they weren't in that tax planning cycle where they were paying significant amounts of taxes, and so a lot of people didn't really see a way to monetize it.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of people just honestly just didn't bother with it. And even I think another group of people were like, hey, I'm the numbers work without it, and I'm unplugging myself from the grid. Why would I go tell the government? So we heard a lot from different people over the years, and so it's not like we're looking at this as, oh, there's some massive overdependency that is we're tripping out on, especially in the do-it-yourself market, and you're more cost-focused installers. I do think there were a lot of probably solar installs that happened in the installed solar market that would never have happened without this tax credit, and people would have had to do a better value than they provided to those homeowners. But that's part of why Signature Solar exists in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Always providing cost-effective products that are good quality.
Yeah, as a transparency too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there's a few different ways, but I think Signature's based on the concept that if you lived in a world where you couldn't go to the hardware store and buy oil for your car, I would bet that the mechanics would charge $400 for an oil change, right? So transparency is really a key thing that has to be involved in any industry if it's going to be progressing, and we felt like we could provide that when we started.
Right. Well, let's get to some of these audience questions. We did have someone that pre-submitted an audience question, and we were going to get to this in a little bit more of the design aspect, but Josh Garola said, I can't be there, and I did have a question. He said, I'm a big fan of EG4 and of James, but with EG4 being a recipient of subsidies to build inverters and batteries in the U.S., are we expecting EG4 to lower costs in a significant way? That was his first question.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the flow of manufacturers this year, people have been ramping up facilities, and those take some time to where those subsidies even make a cost impact. Because like when you first start a factory and you've got a bunch of overhead to pay and different efficiencies on the people, you actually aren't making money with subsidies, you're losing them. So it covers a little bit of a transition. And then the other thing is on the cost flow, right? We started this year where there was a 10% duty on batteries and inverters if you rolled them in. It's now up to 60%. So there's a lot of factors, including how do you reduce your parts cost, and also local source and everything else. Our goal is to, without getting into too many pre-launch details, but by the end of January, and we'll probably do some announcements already plus, but by the end of January, we want to move the value prop of EG4 30% more cost effective. I think we can get there with the bigger systems. I think on the smaller systems, we can only make so much progress. But at the same time, there's a push right now where we're trying to focus on how we manage the importation and everything else, and just make sure the hardware is here for people who can use a tax credit. So there have been some manufacturers that have had like inventory that was pre-one tariff, maybe back in the 10% days and whatever. And so the market looks like a really flexible map.
Okay, and you heard him, some big announcements coming. RE Plus, that's September 9th through 11th. So keep your ears and eyes open for what might be coming from EG4. Awesome. And he also wants to know, how will EG4 compete with the likes of Sig Energy, who brings an equally competitive pricing, shorter and easier installation of their batteries that enable easier scaling, and they bring AI into their solution.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually been to Sig Energy's headquarters in Shanghai when I was in China a few weeks ago with a bunch of our different vendors and just component people, and then Taiwan and Korea and some of the other places we go to. I would question the numbers on that, and I don't know if it's necessarily a peer thing where you're like looking at our retail and some installer account pricing if you do a certain volume, but like we reviewed it with Sig Energy because of where all these vendors and a lot of the ones that compete against us actually tend to be always talking with us, and especially if they're Chinese. It's just a thing in that culture to share information and everything. So with that, I'd say that I don't see that pricing being borne out unless we're looking at some pre-tariff stock at an installer price at one point versus our retail on our current inventory that we're working with up-to-date duties because of we're actually selling a high volume of what we're doing. So I think we can get into with any particular competitor. We can get into that conversation. We're a little less competitor driven than even some of our competitors, but we're more focused on just doing a better and better job on what we can do. The stackable concept is inherently a much more expensive idea for the same system. If you talk about Sig Energy in particular, and I think they recognize that, but I think that they felt like there was a possibility to be, in more of the premium market, which I think they say it's themselves. I know they were Point Guard when they started.
Okay. Jack T wants to know, is the tax credit gone for 2025 or is it gone in 2026? And I think we covered that. He says, for example, I will file my 2025 taxes in February 26 for panels and battery I purchased in 25. Can I still claim the credit?
Absolutely, Jack. That's exactly what we mean when we say the tax credit's gone on January 1st. You're going to, obviously the IRS looks at the previous tax year and you file the year after. All the tax laws that were relevant to the previous tax year stay in force. So your 2025 tax forms that you can attach, I think it's a 5569, but may have, let's get the right number, 5695, I think, form that attaches to your 1040 when you file, that will still be in play for the year 2025. But when you look at the year 2026, which would be in 2027, that form will no longer allow or include credit for solar and storage.
Okay. And Michael Robertson says, what happens to the tax credit in future years if you installed it in 2024 and carry forward tax credits?
Yeah, so this has been addressed as well. You live under the rules of the year that you installed the tax credit, installed the system and got the tax credit. So if you earned it in 2024, you're going to have your 5 years of carry forward that you had into 2029. So there's going to be a carry forward mechanism that we've been told about, and it's the same carry forward mechanism that they've always had. The difference was, Congress exerting their ability to cease creating new tax credits at a certain point ahead of schedule.
Okay, thank you. Wine by the Bay says, what is the impact with the tariffs? Can you quantify what's going to be the percent impact?
Yeah, so the impact with the tariffs is, a bigger and bigger charge on the materials cost of the units. What's going to be the impact? Gosh, it's a great question because there's too many answers for that. It depends on when you ask, right? So right now, I think through the end of the year, we're looking at a cycle of, probably more impact than we want to see long term. But we're at this moment, we have the tax credit. What probably cycles off maybe in December or whatever, and we're going to probably do some cost averaging as soon as we can on this. But we probably start cycling to, again, the manufacturer of the inverters have gotten to a point where, the subsidies may be able to make a dent in the cost, after clearing overhead. So, we spin that in the right direction on, on some cost impact. And then also, there's a lot of different ways that overseas supply can work within the tariff system legally. So there may be some companies that move the manufacturing to a third-party country like Singapore or the Philippines and get a country of origin there, manufacture there. So people are running tariff calculations nonstop
Sure.
And I think also at the same time, here's the other moving goalpost: the component cost in China is reducing. So they are overbuilt on manufacturing, and what we're hearing is that their factories are at 28% capacity, and it kind of leads them to do a bunch of desperate things sometimes.
So there's a lot of moving factors.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, your import costs go up, but your hardware costs go down, and you can run it through some. Basically, when do we see this? To be fair, there's not a final negotiation solution with China yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, the point shoot solution is run it through a third party country for less than the 60%, which I think a lot of people are doing. But things could get worse, or theoretically could get better with China. But then I also think, batteries are going to be the subject of some trade interest over the next several years because of really the demand, the growing demand for national defense industries.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Brian M. asked a good question. It's been a conversation that I've heard people confused by online. He says, is the tax credit expiration for purchased or installed systems?
Yeah, so, we have seen conflicting, first off, we're not CPAs. We have seen conflicting interpretations from CPAs. I'm going to probably just explain the confusion instead of give you an exact answer, because if this is a matter for your own personal consult. So when the bill was written, when it cut out the 25D, and this is where you're hearing the people who say expensed, the wording that they used, if you go Google it and pull up the 25D section on it, the wording that they used was expensed this year, not commissioned. But on top of that, there's a previous, set of regulations for 25D that says that, you get to file a tax credit in the year that you place the system in service, right? And service can be, if you're an off grid, that literally can mean you hooked up your inverter to your battery and powered the thing on, right? That's serviceable at that point, like you've gotten some power out of it. So you could play different games with that. But some tax firms are publicly out there saying, okay, as long as it's expense because of the congressional language that was in the bill, then you're good. Some are saying, no, we would want to see some functionality. But I think they all agree that you don't need to get a permit from your utility company to qualify, right? That permitting is not a concern. It's just, can you demonstrate, even the place in service folks are saying, can you just demonstrate some usability out of the system versus it's all in a pile of boxes in your garage you'll install in March. Are there going to be people that try it both ways? Probably. Right.
So who's going to be the one that's going to make this decision as to whether or not this qualifies?
So these kinds of clarifications are typically up to the Treasury, and there could be some Treasury guidance as early as next week on this. Will they focus on the 25D homeowner credit that they felt like was just kind of like this, mob of tax returns they didn't really care for? I don't know, right? Maybe they will.
Yeah.
And so there might be some solid information there. They may just leave it open. They may just leave it open, and then it'll be a matter of, it's the same thing that is always with your taxes. You can use expert opinions and try to process the tax law the most reasonable way, and you probably do that with a lot of other things in your life and in your tax life. So getting a solid answer from us, what we probably say is, look, the most rigorously safe interpretation is placed in service, which does not include the permitting or any of that stuff, but shows some functionality from the system. If you wanted a no-luck situation, if you want to buy your system and install it in March and argue about the expense, the fact that expense language was used by Congress, if the IRS ever comes and talks to you, unless if the Treasury says some guidance that overrides what I'm saying here, at the end of the day, that's your own personal call, but it's your taxes, and if you have any risk involved in that, that's entirely accrued by you. But we've always, we've seen a lot of people that have done that, frankly, have done the expense thing in the DIY community for years and years. It's why December is always a boom month for us. People always load up and get it on that year's taxes. Right. So honestly, again, that's just navigating the confusion, the things I'm saying. Please do not take that as a solid position. The only solid position is if you place it in service this year, you're absolutely safe.
Right. So John Melansky follows this up and says, what about the word operational? Does it have to be operational? And how does that word follow in with what you're saying?
We're hearing operational not from the Treasury or Congress. We're hearing operational from industry people. So we got to be really careful. You talk about like for me, like I'm filing a tax return. Like, all that really matters is what the government says. Right. Their term is placed in service, and then there's sub parts of that placed in service. So if you have a battery on your system, and if you're doing anything with Signature Solar, you probably are including batteries in what you're doing. If you have a battery on your system, you probably can show that it's a serviceable, that it has some kind of serviceable use. Okay. With just powering on the system essentially.
Okay. So we've got a question from Building a Farm. Says, so even today, the EG4 outdoor 280 amp hour is not eligible for the tax credit due to too much China content?
No. That's a complete confusion there. But a great question, because we've actually I probably had 5 or 6 different people try to process the 25D. Just to be clear, the residential credit that you as a homeowner use is the 25D credit. That credit never had any China content restrictions, period. Right? And it never will, because it will die January 1st before other China content restrictions get put in place. So you won't have that issue with those, with any. You can buy everything that is on Signature Solar right now will fully qualify for a 30% tax credit. Like, full stop. No restrictions on that. Going and talking about the future of maybe some lease financed residential installers that are going to try to sell dollars per month instead of sell you a system, those people are going to have to be really careful about their USA content for sure.
Okay, so we've got 3 questions all together here, clarifying what we just talked about. Install but not grid tied is okay. Installed means the AHJ and utility have passed it. And who verifies that a system is installed and operational?
Yeah, so, okay. If you're talking about a system with an off-grid functionality, right? I think the way I would short circuit this, if it was December 25th and I had gotten my stuff, or it was December 26th and everybody's leaving for after Christmas and I got a few hours and I want to actually and I've got a battery system, my angle is definitively this is an off-grid solar system. Yeah, it may be able to connect to the grid, but definitively it's off-grid solar system. So to place this off-grid solar system in service, you frankly power it on. Right. I mean, I guess like in Signature Cells Anchor, for instance, you buy the thing, open it out of the box, power it on, voila, you've got yourself a placed in service system. So the key thing with that is because the system's definition doesn't depend on the utility or permanent or the AHJ authorizing it, because it's just frankly your tangible personal property, creating your own power, kind of like if you bought a gas generator and pulled the rope on it. Then you've placed it in service. I think that would be, I would definitely say, unless if you're doing a batteryless system, like a grid tie inverter only system, you're going to be perfectly fine with just following that methodology. The grid tie batteryless system has a categorical definition of depending on the authorization to operate from those 2 jurisdictions we talked about. So the thing with anyone who's battery focused is, again, first and foremost, highest and best use, you're focused on providing independent power for your home. You may interact with the grid, but that can be done in 26.
Right.
And so, I think you also asked a question about what was it? Yeah. So you were talking about who verifies that a system is installed and operational. Yeah, that's a great question. Nobody, unless if the IRS comes to you and wants to question your tax credit, and they may, they may ask questions about, hey, can you prove that this was placed in service? So, if you wanted to be an absolute by the book person, pull out your camera and take a video, or, connect the monitoring system and have it show some data, just some kind of a scrap of proof. I really wonder how many of these 25D credits have ever been questioned, especially because of the typical tripwire that we're seeing is if people overprice the price per watt of the system, and DIYers are always way under the market average of solar.
Okay. So T. Konzi, I just want to make sure that we have covered this, that I think we've answered this question. The general consensus is that, yes, the federal tax credit ends on December 31st, 2025. So any system purchased and installed by that date can still take advantage of the FTC
ITC.
if it is put into
service. Yes.
Service.
Yeah, I think that's the most absolute solid statement we can say. Again, I see the legal theories about expensed and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
I think if it was January 26th and it was December 26th and it was my taxes, I would probably open up my boxes, snap some cables together, and turn the thing on.
Right.
And I was a DIYer, yeah, I'd totally do that in the garage. Even if we don't have a grid permit or anything by that period of time, because I now have a functional independent system, which eventually got a way to work with the grid.
Gotcha. Okay, so Building a Farm says, is the current 60% tariff based on retail price or on your cost to build? So to use as buyers, the tariff isn't as significant.
It's the second. It's actually it's why the EG4 batteries have not gone up 60%, right? I think we're actually within about 10% of where we were last year. And you're right, we've squeezed as hard as we could. So it was our core cost. We did a lot of cost down overseas. So that basis number was lower, and then it's 60% on top of that. So yeah, that's why we're not up 60%, right? It's not an excise tax. It's a duty on this stuff, and that's absolutely a good way to look at that. Our profit philosophy has not fattened. It's frankly probably gotten a little leaner in this time, and I think we've also may have even looked at, hey, if we're selling a higher dollar item, we can make a lower profit percentage and make the same dollars per unit profit. So we're using every mathematical mechanism to come to the lowest possible price in a situation like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cliff wants to know, so should I wait till after September 9th to buy GridBoss and FlexBoss and 4 batteries?
Well, it just depends on if you want the tax credit or if you want to do the project in 26 without a tax credit. So what we talk about for the 2026 market, we're going to be releasing a new product line and everything else. We'd like to eventually get that to catch up to the 30% tax credit, but it could be some time. And for a lot of people, depending on the system size, it's not necessarily there. So it just depends on a lot of factors as to what you're doing the system for and why. If you want the energy savings and the power independence now, getting the system and getting the tax credit this year is probably your most surefire bet for your best value. But I think I come into this conversation, I don't want to game the reality that everybody is going to have to focus on and should already have a plan. It takes a year to build a new battery technology, a year to build a new inverter version or anything. And so I would say that you're probably going to feel like a genius if you go ahead and buy that system now for at least the next 15 months. And then even if you see something that is better price in 15 months, even matches it with a tax credit, you'll feel happy you had independent power for 15 months and you didn't pay 15 months of power bills. So I mean, we've always been very passionate at the time to be energy independence now. And I think just monetarily, when you factor in the tax credit, if you've been wanting to do solar for a while, obviously technology improves, and it's our job, at EG4 to use the money that you invest in us today to make solar more affordable for other people in the future. But I think this whole tax credit thing gives you a lot of future-proof confidence. I would actually say there's a lot of confidence in just doing that system before the end of the year and getting the tax credit versus seeing the way things play out. Because of some of our best laid plans, what if we have the trade war with China heat up further, right? Then you might be looking 2 years from now and be feeling like, hey, I was smart and I got in. So it's really, what's the value of you of not having to pay a power bill for 2 years or 15 months and having whole home backup that whole period of time. Because of when we cross the hash marks for the people who were going to get the tax credit to be, in that same spot, that exact time and all the factors that play there, could be adjustable. It's a tough balance. I remember 10 years ago when I first installed systems for people, we talk about it 5 years later, they enjoyed it, but they knew they could get a better system at the time for the same money.
Yeah. So you're saying if people have been on the fence and they've been wondering, what they should do, you're saying if you're thinking about it, now's really the time?
Yeah. I think now's really the time until, we'll try to cross the hash marks as fast as we can, but some place maybe a little later in 26 or early 27, where you'll be in the same position as if you had gotten the tax credit. And that's always the way that, people would talk about this when I was a professional installer. Even if they found out that, they'd be like, yeah, but I had backup and, I had no power bills all this time. Right. So that's the real value I was in it. I was, in that for versus, shocker, technology gets better over time. But I also think what we do in the future we're rigorously backwards compatible. I think that's something that we're, as we've really scaled up as a company and gotten a major position in the market, we're trying to make sure that the moves we've been making over the last year or so in new product development are going to be backwards compatible with everybody, to where if you do upgrade, you'll be able to use that new technology whenever that technology makes sense for you.
Kind of the way that I've wanted to look at it for myself, because I'm looking for my opportunity to go solar, but I haven't gotten there yet. But the faster that you can do it, the more independent you are, and the more it doesn't matter what happens with the government.
Well, I mean, and you have a tangible monthly factor, which is your power bill, and everyone can afford it on any given month. But that's the whole problem. It's kind of like renting versus owning a home, and why so many people want to own a house, right? Because you can. A lot of people can afford rent, but the thing is that over a 10-year period, the rent's going to make you broke. And when you look at energy, I'd argue the same thing. The longer you stay on it, the more power it has to make you broke.
You're paying yourself for it rather than paying somebody else for it. Yeah, for sure. So we have some more questions. We've got a lot of questions. I hope we can get through them all. Let's see. Building a farm, do all EG4 items have enough USA components to qualify for the tax credit this year? I think we've addressed that one. That it doesn't have anything to do with the.
And weirdly enough, you look in the boards, so a lot of the stuff is a lot of the boards are put together in China. It's got a Texas Instruments chip from the United States. It's got MOSFETs from Germany. It's the way electronics have been built in the past, and there's a lot of new directions that we're going to be going. It's China was the integrator, but there's still a lot of components. If we had to go and bean count there, but we're not. Again, we're just, to your point, and what we said earlier, it is completely irrelevant to the 25D in 2025, to your residential tax credit. Don't even worry about it. Next year, professional installers trying to sell you monthly payments instead of owning the system, they will have to worry about that with the hardware they buy. And they might end up buying more expensive hardware on top of the margin that they take to comply, which may give the DIY advantage a little more of an edge.
Now, you've kind of moved away from the distributor mindset, and you're working with signatures. I mean, EG4 now is manufacturer, but this question from John Melansky says, in what ways is Signature Solar considering lowering the overall cost of DIY systems to help compensate for the loss of the credit?
Well, I mean, I honestly can't speak for Signature Solar. I think it's transparent that I started them, and I'm basically an active board member. But I talk to Brian Pasco over here all the time, and I think he's looking at a lot of different ways that Signature has to provide the level of service and experience people want. It costs a lot of jobs and a lot of people, and so we're looking. I think what I'm hearing from him is we're looking at our scale costs as we try to grow. We're looking at what are ways to use the same people and maybe not scale the overhead as much, so we can operate on a slightly tighter window, providing that service. We think in DIY, it's not e-commerceable as easily as a lot of other things, because if you're making a 5-digit investment typically for power independence for your family, you're saving a lot of money, and you're really taking a step for your financial future, but you really need a hand holder. And that's, I think, what Signature puts on the table, is more people to consult you on your projects that are NABCEP certified than really any other spot in the country. So we want to amplify that and see how do we put more tools, artificial intelligence in customer support, and other things that we can do to amplify some of the superstars that we have here. In addition to possibly bringing the shipping costs down by doing national distribution, I think that might be another thing at play. So I think those are a few examples, but at the same time, Signature's going to be watching its line card to look for manufacturers that are moving in the direction of cost effectiveness and value for the customer. And some of the manufacturers are probably going to be ignoring this or could ignore this. And I think that Signature will emphasize those less and emphasize the other ones more.
Got you. Thomas C. says, where in the IRS Form 5695 indicate must it be grid tied? Install it by year's end, meet the 3K PV, or in batteries that qualify for tax credit, correct?
Yeah. So again, I'm not a CPA, but when we talk about there's a three. I think you've got a few different things mixed up on there, Thomas. So I'm just going to unpack this. The Form 5695. Does it indicate that it must be grid tied? It doesn't. So all IRS forms have instruction publications as well. Check those out. But yeah, there's no question that off grid is grid tie is not required, like we've been talking about, which is the nebulous of what I've been saying about how to commission it. Installed by year's end, I think there's placed in service methodology that is described in the instructions that you should follow. And optimally, unless if the expense language gang that reads the one beautiful bill wins the argument. And then the 3K PV and batteries, I think we're confusing two things, right? California has a demand for 3 kilowatts of PV. The 3 kilowatt hours is the battery minimum for the 25D credit, which is in the instructions. So I think those are all those topics really quickly, and hopefully that seems like we're answering a lot of those tax questions. So happy to keep you rolling with any other questions. Yes.
All right. Will Can says, if I buy a generator to complement battery, is the generator covered?
Generator covered with a tax credit. Generator, I don't think qualifies for the tax credit because of it is not a renewable generation source under 25D. I don't think it's ever been qualified.
Okay. How does postponement of China tariffs impact our price for the next 90 days?
It's a lot of factors here. It definitely does mean that we've brought, next 90 days, all inventory that'll be here before the end of the year, we'll get in the next 90 days. It really gives us a lot of stability to lock in, some price certainty for people that are trying to jump in and get their systems installed before the end of the year and get that tax credit. And it also gives us a platform. We can also, look at ways that, we can incentivize people that are buying, different volumes or sizes of systems that, fit our profitability or cost base is better. Look at special incentives on that as we get to the year end. Obviously, we always do a big Black Friday, Cyber Monday gig. And the problem with those is we tend to sell out of inventory because of how much demand is always driven up there. It's independence on sale. So, but we do some pretty strong things in the in the intervening period, September and October. We do some very strong things, and a lot of people just feel more comfortable to get the system installed. And I think it's relatively comparable between like shipping incentives or whatever else. So, I think it does provide a lot of stability coming into here. Knowing the 90-day aspect, I think was part of why I'm kind of in my position of I think the way things are going to pencil out is everyone who gets their system done before December 31st, gets it done before December 31st, and hurries up and does that, will feel like they could not have gotten a better deal for at least 15 or so months. And then by the time that 15 months roll around, they will have saved 15 months of power bills and probably have their system paid off 25% already, which is 25% off of not doing something. Plus, we're living with a more and more unreliable grid. I mean, some incredible information that we're seeing from the Department of Energy, which is kind of inspiring us at EG4 to think about heftier and heftier battery solutions. So we can provide bigger batteries for a better kind of price per kilowatt hour.
That's great. Well, James, we've had a lot of questions come in, and I know you've given us more time than we asked for. We're going to wrap this up. But one last question. With all of these changes, and where do you think that you see solar moving within the next 2 to 5 years? I mean, what's your forecast for the future?
Yeah, stepping back and processing this, I think that this is going to, in general, the bill is one thing, the trade war is another, and then there's an energy reality for America that's hitting at the same time. So within the American context, and the American market's going to work very different than any other country in the world for solar, right? In the next 5 years, we have the Department of Energy telling us that we are looking at 800 hours of power outages for the average American. So some people worse, some people better, but that's an insane amount of power unreliability. It's been driven by, the surge in demand from AI. So we're going to see people start really thinking about energy reliability, and that's going to add a value here. Our goal has been to pay you back financially without even factoring in energy reliability, because if America has such a reliable grid. I think we see some factors where energy gets so unreliable. It's a huge problem. And we also are going to see that demand drive up cost way past inflation. I think people are going to be living in 5 to 15% cost increase years, which is going to just rapidly accelerate the payback on this stuff. And then finally, I think the big beautiful bill is going to, when the dust settles, and not my target phase out time of 6 months, but when the dust settles on it, and people adjust, you're going to be in a much more competitive, transparent, and innovative environment. I think any technological field that has less government intervention and less, government subsidization ends up going that direction, very much like computers and cell phones and everything else. So I think that people will probably maybe feel like they had a bad day for 6 months to 9 months into 26, but and some people won't even care. And then by the end of 26 and into 27, we're going to have, kind of a demand level that we've never seen before, because everybody's going to want it. And when people like you guys go off grid and you have your own independent system, it's going to say so much to your neighbors and friends that, hey, energy independence is possible. And when they start living through blackouts and you've got backup, that you're going to be a huge factor in really getting other people to be interested in doing the same thing, because they'll realize they could do the same thing.
Yeah. And I look forward to when I can get solar, because I know that I can be in charge of what is happening at my house.
Yeah.
And what's going out of my pocket.
True. Yeah. I would probably, like I said to the audience, I'd do it this year.
Right. Exactly.
Because you might want the reliability and the saved power bills. But there's some great options to make that work. So appreciate your time, Kelly.
Yeah. Thank you, James. And thanks for helping us understand and breaking down what this big, beautiful bill actually means for us. And, I think it's clear, while change is coming, I think it's full of opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think it's encouraging to see that EG4 and Signature Solar is preparing to lead the way and lead through it. So to all of you joining us, thanks for joining in on the conversation. If we didn't get to your question, hopefully we can, you heard some of the answers that helped you understand it a little bit more, and help you understand what this bill, how it might affect your plans for going solar. The good news is, as James said, you still have options and the power is in your hands. If you're wondering what steps to take next or want help navigating your solar journey, give us a call. Our sales team is here to help you reach your energy goals. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Facebook at Signature Solar US, so you never miss an episode of Amp Up. And we'll see you right here next time on Amp Up Solar Talk. See ya.